All right, forgive me if my enthusiasm is a little curt, but this is the third time I'm taping this. I'm hoping it works. Uh, I regret rubbing ketchup in my eyes, but that's hindsight. Sorry. Um, so enjoy that for a minute. You might have to pause it while you laugh and then start over again. All right, so nervous system, we know what that is, right? Nervous system is basically the information superhighway. It's the internet of your body, right? Sending signals back and forth. You got the brain, spinal cord, and a few billion nerve fibers that connect everything, right? Nervous system is pretty well protected. It's encased for the most part. Your brain and spinal cord are encased in bone, right? Your skull protects your brain. Vertebrae protect the spinal cord, right? But that being said, under severe trauma, right, a major mechanism of injury that you can still have severe injuries, right? It can still happen. So, two parts we talked about: central and peripheral. Central is just that, brain, spinal cord. Peripheral is everything branching out off of it. Okay, here's how it works, right? We know how this works. Your nerves send signals to your brain, and your brain says, "Hey, do this," right? And it sends it back. Okay. Little fun side note: if you have a reflex, like "Ooh, I touched a hot iron," you skip this, right? It makes a connection here and goes right back. Ooh, that's why when you touch something hot, you touch an iron, or your body withdraws before your brain feels, "Ooh, ow, that's hot." I don't know if you ever noticed that before, but it does. You'll retract your hand before you feel the heat. Right, your body. That's your body doing that. Um, so brain controls the body. Duh. Center of consciousness. Duh. We know all this stuff. Okay, the three major areas of the brain: cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem. They all have very different duties they're in charge of. Higher thinking, right? Physical stuff, and stuff we don't even know about that it's controlled, right? The brainstem. So there you see the cerebrum, right? Big part, cerebellum back here, and the spinal cord, brainstem, right in there. Cerebrum, that's your higher level functioning. Cerebellum is balance of body movements, and the brainstem is your temperature, your blood pressure, your heart rate, all that stuff that we don't control. Um, your intestinal system, right? Everything moving, stuff that you're not controlling. Okay, spinal cord is essentially nerve fibers that extend. They're really long nerve cells, right? That extend all the way down, and that's your HDMI cables, right? That's where the information passes from your brain to the rest of your body. So protective coverings. Your brain and spinal cord are protected with fixed structures, right? We've got the brain, the skull, and the spinal cord that cover the skull, and the vertebrae that cover the brain and spinal cord. Sorry. And then we've also got meninges, which are a fibrous lining. Okay, and if you've ever heard the word meningitis, that would be inflammation / infection of the meninges, right? That can happen. You've got the dura mater, which is the outer layer, or tough fibrous layer that contains the stuff inside, and then you've got the arachnoid mater and pia mater, which actually have blood vessels and kind of cushion the brain. Jeopardy stuff here, right? Dura mater is the outside, arachnoid and pia mater are the inside coverings. Okay. So cutaway view of the brain and skull here, not an actual brain and skull. You can see it's covered with skin, muscle, right? Skin, the fascia, kind of same principle, right? There's a thin lining of meat there in your muscle, right? And then you've got a couple layers of bone, essentially. It's basically one layer, but it's got the soft tissue inside of it. Dura mater on the outside, you can see the arachnoid and the pia mater. In between those is where the blood vessels go, right? And through that pia mater is where the blood will cross over the blood-brain barrier. Cerebrospinal fluid is inside the brain and kind of cushions everything, right? It's a shock absorber. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about CSF later. You have 31 pairs of spinal nerves, right? That run down your spine and they connect. Right, they branch off and connect everything, and 12 pairs of cranial nerves that go into your brain. Okay, so there's a little view, right, of what they look like. The spinal nerves branch off. So peripheral nerves, what comes off of the spinal cord goes out. You've got sensory nerves and motor nerves. The sensory nerves are carrying information to the brain, and the motor nerves are carrying information away from the brain. Right, so sensory is the input, motor is the output. Okay. That's hot. Move my hand, right? Boom, you've got sensory that feels it. You've got motor that says, hey, move it. So input, output. Okay, I don't know why that drawing is still on there. Okay, but connecting nerves basically connect the two together. Generally in your brain, but they also have some of that in your spinal cord also. That's that, ooh, hot, move my hand, right? Reflex nerve. Okay. So how it works, right? Your nervous system controls everything, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. What you want, the movement that you control, or the movement that happens automatically, or the movement necessary for everyday life that you don't even pay attention to. Right? That's reflex stuff. Okay, involuntary stuff. So not just throwing a ball, but also the ball moving at your head and you move quick, right? Reflex. That is your nervous system controlling that. Okay? This is what we talked about before, that reflex arc. It's not a short circuit, but kind of where, ooh, that's hot. Before you even feel the heat, you move it. That's because it's kind of jumping the loop there. Instead of going up to the brain and back, it kind of skips over. Okay? So you have your somatic and autonomic nervous systems. Okay, your somatic is what you do. That's what you control. The autonomic, that is your body doing its own thing. Okay, the two parts of the autonomic nervous system are the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is fight or flight. That's adrenaline. That's your body's gearing up, right? You get scared, right, or mad or whatever. That's the rush of adrenaline. Okay, that's sympathetic, getting ready. Your body's gearing up to fight. The parasympathetic is the opposite. Calms down, right? Slows everything down. So that's kind of the functions of the autonomic nervous system. Okay. Your skull. Switching gears here. The cranium, which is all the main bones that make up the actual skull of the brain box. Right. Then you've got nasal bones, zygoma, maxilla, mandible. Right. Zygoma is the eye orbit. Okay. Maxilla is the top jaw, mandible, bottom jaw. 4 bones. The occiput, occipital region, right? The temples, temporal bones, parietal and frontal bones, and your face, right? We're not going to expect you to memorize a lot of those. Just got to recognize what they are. The zygoma is one. These 3, I told you 2 before. These are kind of the 3 that you probably want to know. Zygoma is around the eyes, the cheekbones, right? The maxilla and mandible, top jaw, bottom jaw, right? Those are basically the ones you're going to want to know the names of. Most often cause issues with facial fractures. Okay, spinal column, 33 vertebrae. Remember that. That's an important number to know. Okay, they're connected by ligaments just like all joints, and they're separated by discs, by cartilage, just like a lot of joints. Okay, and then they're surrounded by muscles. Okay, so fairly well protected, but not perfect. Okay, especially when you're dealing with major trauma, major mechanism. Okay, so how I always remember this: C7, T12, L5. Right, those are the important ones. You've also got the sacral. They're all fused. Right, so the sacrum and the coccyx are fused bones. Right, so generally when you're talking about vertebrae, people are worried about cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. Technically, there's 33 vertebrae, but those are the important ones. Lumbar's 5, or sacrum's 5, coccyx is 4. But I always remember C7, T12, L5. That's the important ones that are all separated. So head injuries, hitting your head can cause lots of issues. Duh. We all know that. That's why you wear bike helmets, or if you don't, I will yell at you. Head injuries account for more than half of all traumatic deaths, and they don't have to be major head injuries. They don't have to be like 100 miles an hour into a brick wall, right? It can be fall and hit your head on the corner of the corner of a dresser, and that contact in that corner causes a fracture. Whereas if you would have hit your head on a flat surface, you would have been concussion and fine. Weird things happen, right? So a lot of traumatic deaths aren't like horribly major trauma. You trip and fall, people trip and fall and hit their head in a bad spot, right? It was last summer, late summer. There was a death in the cities where there was a bar fight and a guy punched him and he fell back and hit his head on the curb, died, right? Should have been nothing. Should have been, maybe a concussion, and instead he's dead. Now it's a murder charge, right? So it happens. So anytime you have head trauma, we want to be aware or be wary, right? High index of suspicion. Okay, head injuries are closed or open, just like all injuries. Closed means it didn't break the skin. Open means it did. Bad deal. Open head injury is a bad deal. Open facial injury is bad, but not the end of the world. But an open head injury is bad. So we want to get those people help ASAP. Okay. Most common MI for head injuries is motor vehicle crashes, followed closely by assaults, falls, and sports-related injuries. Anytime you get hit in the head, can be a bad day. So concussions are a weird thing. I've seen guys get hit really hard, and not concussed. I've seen guys that got tackled not real hard, hit their head on the turf not real hard, and then wind up with a concussion. So it can happen just weirdly like that. So football gets a bad rap for concussions, which there are some, but soccer is a really bad one. People will hit balls with their head, and on purpose, and so that's a really bad one too for sports. All right, so signs and symptoms of a head injury. There's a ton of them, right? When you look at it, it's a huge list. Everything from a laceration on the head to irregular breathing to seizures to dizziness, right? So there's a ton of things that are signs of head injuries. That's why we're so cautious about concussions. There's no one thing that says, oh, yeah, that's a concussion. It could be any of these. Okay? Tiredness, dizziness, cerebral CSF fluid, right? Cerebrospinal fluid. So tons of things. Lacerations, we talked about this the other day with the kid on the bus. Tiny little, quarter-inch cut, maybe half-inch at most. Bled like a stuck hog, right? They bleed a ton, especially in kids. Okay, so you can't go on blood alone to determine whether it's major or minor, right? So skull fractures, again, can be open or closed. How do we know if it's a skull fracture? If it's closed, look for deformity and not just like Tyne's head, like actual depression or somehow appears deformed. Okay, you might see through the skin, obviously, see cracks in the skull. You might see ecchymosis, which is bruising. Raccoon eyes, I'm going to show you a picture in a second. Or battle sign is another one. That one's kind of hidden. Right, those raccoon eyes there. That's different from. Right, you look at that. That's different than any black eye you've ever seen. Right, that's a bad deal. And then the battle sign on the right. That's behind the ears from a skull fracture back behind, kind of base of the skull, the back of the skull. And we'll kind of show you what that is here in a little bit. But those are obvious signs. Okay, linear skull fractures, you're oftentimes not going to see much of those. You're not going to be able to tell. A lot of times those are right along the natural seams in the bone. Okay, so linear ones are tougher to find. Usually they'll be tender, but you won't know for sure it's a break. Depressed skull fractures, a lot of times that's that corner of the dresser or hit by a baseball, or those are trauma in a smaller area that will cause a depression. And you'll feel. You're not going to push on them, right? But as we palpate the skull, you'll feel that. Okay, basilar skull fractures. That's that back base of the skull, the back of the skull, right behind your ears. That's where you get those battle signs. Right? Raccoon eyes sometimes from that. Open fractures, that's a bad day. What are we going to do? We're going to cover it with moist gauze, wrap it, and get the heck on the road.